From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. My name is John Small and I am your host, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to my guest today, Andrea Meharg. And Andrea is the head cannabis science educator at the Cannabis Coaching Institute, and she also runs Reveal Cannabis, which is a coaching and education platform. Andrea is passionate about teaching people how they can feel better with the power of plant medicine. She's got a great personal story, and I've got a lot of questions to ask her myself. So Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a big fan.
Oh, well, thank you. So you have a great origin story about how you got into this line of work. I mean, you were, I guess, a grade school teacher, elementary school teacher, and you might not have been sort of the typical person that we think would become a cannabis coach. So tell us a little bit about the origin of how this all came about.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Like, oh, you, because I taught grade 2 mostly. So it's
Right.
really, it's a far reach for some people. So yeah, I was doing what I think many 30-something moms are doing, which was I was trying to balance a career, and I had 2 young boys at home. I have my husband, all my other responsibilities and relationships that I need to maintain. And I had let myself really fall to the bottom of the to-do list. Like if I ever made it on the list at all, it was always at the bottom. And I was in a pretty bad state of general health and also mental health, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that this wasn't the way that you were supposed to be. I just thought everyone was doing it. We're
Right.
all juggling balls in the air. So all of those balls came crashing down for me in October about 5 years ago. I landed in the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack because I was about 100 pounds overweight and not taking any care of myself. It turns out I was having a panic attack, and the doctor took me off work and said, like, you are not able to go back and do your job. And then I fell into like a deep and serious depression that I couldn't get out of. I tried all the things that you're supposed to try, medication. I went to the doctor. I went to a therapist. I exercised. I did meditation. I did yoga, and nothing was helping. I was just crying in bed all day. And my mom gave me a bag of weed for
No way,
Christmas
your mom.
that year. Yeah. My mom, she's the greatest. She said, I think this might help. And my husband and I stared at the baggie for, I'm going to say 6 weeks, because we were both nervous about it. Had to YouTube how to roll a joint because we didn't know. But the very first puff I took of the joint, I describe it like the clouds lifted or parted, I guess. And I could like remember who the real me was inside, the one without all this postpartum depression and all of that. And so it was liberating, and I thought I'd finally found the answer. And it turns out that using cannabis for depression is way harder than just taking a pill and feeling better. So it took me months and months and months and so much money to figure out how I could use cannabis to help me go about doing my life. Like I wanted to get back to my life without being high all the time. And my family doctor refused to help me. And the cannabis doctor was literally no help. So I got really mad, and I thought, like, who the heck? Whose job is it to teach me how to use this stuff? And that's when I found the Cannabis Coaching Institute, and I signed up for their first class. And I'm trained to be a cannabis coach and educator so that I could help other people who are wanting to use this plant to live healthier lives and better lives. But it's so hard, right? Like, it's hard to know what to do and how to start. So,
it's so interesting.
That's how I started.
What a great story, and I'm glad that it has a happy ending. Tell me a little bit about, you said that after taking that pup, the clouds cleared. It was really a wonderful experience for you. But then to continue on consuming cannabis, you felt like there was no guidance. What were you kind of looking for? Wasn't it enough to just have taken that puff and had the clouds clear? Like what was
Oh God,
you
if
were
only.
looking for?
Yeah. I really wanted to know how I could use cannabis in my everyday life. My depression was severe. I was at times suicidal. And again, I had little boys at home who I was trying to take care of. So what I wanted to do was microdose, but I had no idea that was a word or that was even a thing. So, like I said, I talked to my own doctor. She still thinks I'm the devil for doing this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
And the
pretty
cannabis clinic
backwards.
here, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really backwards, actually. In the cannabis clinic here, many of the cannabis clinics in Canada are tied directly to licensed producers. And so oftentimes it feels like you're just in their funnel of becoming a patient so that you can purchase your cannabis from
Mm,
their head honchos. And they also didn't seem really hell bent on getting me out of depression and getting me back to work and back to doing my thing. So we've come a long way since then too, though. This is 5 years ago,
right.
and
Was cannabis even legal in Canada? No.
no, not yet. Although we had a really good medical program. So,
Right.
I mean, I say it's a good medical program, except for I wasn't able to use the medical program to figure out how to use medical cannabis to help me.
Yeah, it was
So,
complicated.
yeah, it is
And I'm sure, and
complicated.
that's Canada, and it's just as complicated here, believe me, if not more so, because it's not even legal here.
Significantly more
Yeah, it's not even
yeah.
legal
Yeah.
here. I mean, it's legal where I am in California, but it's not legal in a lot of places. So, what is it that you learned over the course of time that you now teach others? As far as you just mentioned microdosing, I'm curious about that. What is it that you learned about microdosing?
I've learned a million things,
Yeah.
and I'll kind of talk about it like this. So I started in the first crew of the Cannabis Coaching Institute, and Corinne Tobias is the founder of the Institute. She runs a really wonderful website called Wake and Bake, and I had followed her and I decided to take the leap. I'm going to do this thing. But like I said, that was her first class. So right away, I realized that for me, for the way my brain works, there was not enough cannabis science in the program, that I wanted to know much more about how and why cannabis was working for me so that I could fine tune it to my own body. So I started working with Corinne right away to like kind of input more science into the program. And then this past year, just in February of 2021, we re-released the Cannabis Coaching Institute, completely redone, like a completely redesigned program. And now I can talk confidently about the way that our students go through the program and what they do learn about all of these things so that they can go on and help their clients
Mm,
learn how to use cannabis appropriately. So we talk about everything. We start with the plant and all the different parts of the plant and the way the plant can be used. We move on to the cannabinoids and what cannabinoids might be helpful for. We talk about terpenes. We spend a lot of time talking about dosing because that's,
that's the big
that's where
question.
the real magic is, and different ingestion methods. So the students come out with a really strong foundation about cannabis science, about how and why the plant is working, so that they are able to ask the right questions and guide their clients down the right path. And even when your client's on the right path, that doesn't mean what you recommend to them is going to work right away for them. I'm sure that one product
Yeah,
doesn't work for
it's
you and
very
your best
personal
friend or your
cannabis.
husband.
It's very personal
Very
cannabis, which is
personal.
why I feel like having a coach is so important. It's like having a personal trainer or something, like everybody has to work out differently and there's different
Mhm.
exercises for different bodies and different goals. So you at this point are coaching the coaches, right?
At this point, I'm coaching. I also do, in my own private business, Reveal Cannabis, I also do private consultations with clients. So I get to do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now, my main role at CCI is helping all the new students really understand the science of how and why it works.
So let's talk about your Reveal practice and coaching, since most of our listeners might be interested in having a cannabis coach or understand what a cannabis coach actually does. How does it work? Like let's say I enlist your services as a personal cannabis coach. Can you take me through some of the steps?
Yeah, perfect. I run a modified version of what we teach at the Cannabis Coaching Institute. So if you were to come to me as a client, I would ask you some intake questions on an intake form just so I can get an idea of what you're looking for. And then we meet on the phone for about half an hour. And I ask you a bunch of questions that you don't normally get asked by strangers from the internet.
What like
Um,
what? What are some of the questions?
I talk a lot about your current cannabis use, which for a lot of people is really uncomfortable because it's something very hidden for
Mm,
lots of people. But we also talk about what medications you are and how much do you weigh. So that's what I mean. Like it's like a
yeah.
random conversation with someone. You're like, oh, okay. the reason I ask all those questions and try to get a really deep profile is so that I can go through and create a personalized guide for you that outlines for you why I think cannabis, whatever cannabinoid I'm going to recommend, why I think it might be helpful for your condition, the products that I think you might want to purchase, and doses to start with. So you get this plan in your email the next day, and you follow along with the plan. It teaches you how to increase or decrease your dose. Plus, you have 2 months of support with me. So if you have any questions, and people have lots of questions, then
Yeah.
you can email me and get a pretty quick response. And I also book a second follow-up call with you at some point in those 2 months, because we often have much different questions at the beginning of our cannabis journey than we do once we've kind of dialed in the process. And yeah, my goal is that by the end of the 2 months with me, that you don't need me anymore, that I've taught
Yeah.
you enough about learning how to use cannabis on your own, that you can go out and explore new products and new ingestion methods and still feel really confident about it.
Who are your clients generally in terms of their level of, let's start first with their level of cannabis consumption. Are we talking about the canna curious here? Are we talking about sort of veteran cannabis? I guess a veteran cannabis person wouldn't want to coach because they sort of know what they're doing.
The vast majority of my clients are people who are brand new to cannabis. They've never touched it before. And so there's a lot to unpack there. Or they used to consume before, whenever before was, but they consumed it for fun. And now they're looking to use it in a more intentional way.
Like
And then I
medicine, like for
do have
pain,
some,
like
pardon?
pain and sleep when you say intentional way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're looking, they've heard, for example, like I heard that CBD can be used for anxiety, but when I smoked pot when I was a teenager, it made me really paranoid. They're trying to figure out like, how does that work, kind of thing. And it's really important. Like most people do not have time to read all these books and to,
Yeah.
immerse themselves into the cannabis world like you and I do. So to have somebody who has kind of all of that stored up here and can just filter out the information that you need in order to move you along in your path is really important.
What's the question you get the most?
Okay, I can do like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Do I have to get high?
Mm-hmm.
Almost all the time. Is CBD bunk? Like
Yeah.
is this for real?
Yeah.
And then the question I get, I guess most often, is dosing. People are actually, I shouldn't say that. The question I get most often is, what strain should I use for
This.
insert condition?
Yeah.
And after that, it's dosing. But yeah, everybody thinks, or many people think, that there's a magic strain that I'm going to pull out of the ether.
Right.
That I'm going to say, like, take this and your depression will be gone. And unfortunately, it doesn't
Well, you
work
gotta
like
try
that for
different-
so many reasons.
All right, let's go
Yeah.
through those questions. I know there's long answers probably to each, but I'd love to just touch on them. So the first was, do I have to get high? Do you have to get high?
No. So
Right.
the cannabis plant produces over 150 different molecules, and we know the most about THC, which people can remember, it's the high causer. We know the most about that scientifically and anecdotally over thousands of years of use, and we're starting to learn a lot more about CBD. THC, although it does make people feel high or stoned or euphoric, that's all dose dependent. And we're starting to learn so much more about how very, very small doses of THC in particular can help people to feel better in a myriad of different ways without any intoxication or any high or any stoned at all. And I also like to tell people that the high, euphoric, stoned feeling is a lovely feeling.
Mm-hmm.
For many people, they're very scared of it because maybe they've had a bad dose experience in
Yeah,
the past.
too much. Right.
But yeah, if you can titrate your dose up slowly and you can feel that wave of relaxation, or it kind of feels like a warm hug, or just feeling more in tune with people or more in love with people, it's a lovely feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge THC fangirl, but no, if you don't want to be high, let's talk about all the different ways you can take cannabis without ever feeling intoxicated.
Now, you also mentioned, I think the second question was, is CBD like a bunch of hype? And I've asked this question in my line of work many times because I use CBD and I'm still not sure. But I also think that it all depends on the product you're using, the quality of the CBD, how much you're taking, how much THC needs to be in, does it, like the stuff that doesn't have any THC, does that work? So I already have a lot of questions, but I think I know the answer to your question is that CBD probably does work, but there's conditions, right?
Yeah, and you just named off like the conditions that I would really think about. In Canada, our regulatory system is pretty strict. So if you're buying CBD here from a legal market, you can trust that it has been tested and that if it says 10 milligrams of CBD, it's got 10 milligrams of CBD. In the States, it is literally a wild west with everything that's not THC. Like I don't know what's happening down there.
Delta 8. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff.
I know. So if you can find a quality source of CBD, and this takes like a lot of work to really figure out who's just trying to make a buck and who's growing plants for the right reason and, processing them in a healthful way so that you're getting the healthy benefits from it. So if you can find a product that works, if you can find the dose for you, and CBD dosing is nothing like THC dosing. For most people, it takes several days, weeks, maybe even longer to really slowly ratchet up your dose until you're actually feeling the effects. It's not like, you smoke a joint and you're woo. It's not like that at all with CBD. So finding the right dose. And yeah, you nailed it. We know that for many people, including a little bit of THC with their CBD dose can help them feel better than if they had no THC in their dose. And many, many people do well with what's called like a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 part CBD and 1 part THC. And that's where a lot of people find their sweet spot is. But that doesn't mean it's your sweet spot. Your sweet spot may be like 10 parts CBD and 1 part THC.
And then how much should you take of that 1-to-1 dose? Which I guess got to the third question is what dose? And I think, is it possible to do this on your own? Because it's really hard to find the information. I mean, I'm in the business and I still find it hard to understand how much CBD I should be taking for my body weight. And so how do you advise in that way?
It is really tough. I rely on scientists who are doing this work, researchers and scientists who are doing this work. Many of my favorite resources are written by cannabis clinicians who are working in the practice. So they not only have the scientific knowledge of what's working in studies, which I mean, cannabis studies up until about the past 4 or 5 years have been really hard to take without a grain of salt because there's been so many competing interests in trying to ensure that we're only studying that cannabis causes negative effects. Yep. So the studies are one thing, but to listen to doctors who are working with patients, and even once you kind of have the formula in your head, so I teach the coaches at the Cannabis Coaching Institute a number of steps to go through with their clients so that we can kind of narrow in on good dosing. Even with that, it doesn't matter because if I'm gonna help somebody who's, let's say, suffering with insomnia, if their endocannabinoid system isn't functioning well, if they're under a lot of stress, if they're not eating well, if they never exercise, that's going to be a much different dose than someone who's also suffering with insomnia, who's in a different place. So it really is about teaching the client how to track, really, really important, like how to track everything that's going on. And yes, it's totally possible to do this work without a coach. You would start with small doses and slowly increase and try new products, try new ingestion methods. It's not an unsolvable mystery. It's just not also take 1 pill and then you feel better. Yeah. It's somewhere in between.
And it takes time. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about CBD and THC, but there's other compounds. There's so many other compounds in cannabis that we're just starting to discover and can now be found in some of the products. Talk to me about CBN. A lot of people are very high on CBN, no pun intended. Tell me about CBN.
Yeah, CBN, the word on the street is that CBN will help you to sleep. It's sometimes coined as the sleepy cannabinoid. CBN doesn't naturally grow on the plant at all. It's a degradation product of THC. So if you leave your THC flower or bud in improper storage conditions, out in the light, in not cool conditions, so it's out in the light and the heat, over time it slowly degrades. The THC degrades into CBN. This takes a while over the course of maybe from the very beginning up to 2 years, maybe. So what's happened in the market is that For whatever reason, people think that CBN is helping them to sleep, even though there's no scientific proof that this is the case at all.
Right.
What the researchers actually think is happening is it's a combination of CBN and THC that's helping you to feel sleepy. But what's happened is that cannabis producers who have all this old product that they couldn't get rid of for whatever reason, that's already starting to degrade into CBN. Well, now they can make all these amazing CBN products, and maybe it really does help people sleep. I'm not saying, like, if CBN's helping you sleep, fantastic. But again, we don't have any proof that's saying it is. If you're looking to get help with sleep, I would always start with THC and really play around with your THC dosing before you move to CBN. Although CBN might be your thing, and this is why
that's interesting.
Trial and
so
error
much, there's so much hype around CBN. I'm glad that you revealed that. Are there any other compounds though that are coming up that you think are a little bit more legit than CBN?
Nope.
Not really.
I'm not saying CBN isn't legit.
No,
CBN
I know what you mean.
does have some healing properties, and it's a natural part of the cannabis plant. So, like, try CBN all you want. I am way, way, way more scared about and upset about the other products that you guys are starting to have access to. Like we talked about Delta 8, there's Delta something 0, there's all of these
HTC or something, or there's
all of these Franken products that are all of these Delta 8 and the Delta 10 and all of that is all made by doing some really funky stuff to CBD when they're isolating it from the plant. They bathe it in acid, they do some chemical things so that the molecular structure rearranges slightly, which makes it quote unquote legal in the United States, even though it's not, but it makes it so that you can get it in your local dispensary in many different states. The problem with these products is that they're not on a regulated market, or if they are in a legal regulated market, like, look for lab testing, but just know that you are not consuming cannabis the way that we have been for thousands of years. You're consuming a product that's been made by some extremely smart and inventive people who maybe aren't looking out for your health.
Wow. This is great information. Last thing I want to ask you about is terpenes, because that's that's another thing that we hear quite a bit about, that you should look at the different terpenes. And people don't usually go that deep, I think, when they're consuming cannabis, to look at the label. And sometimes it's not even on the label, at least not in the States, right? It is on the Wana brands. But so what should they look for? I mean, there's so many different terpenes, so you don't have to talk about it. But are you bullish on terpenes?
I love talking about terpenes. Okay. Yeah. So terpenes are the essential oils that make all plants smell, and they're also found on the cannabis plant. The cannabis plant produces a few dozen of them in any kind of regularity. And the reason that you want to know about terpenes and think about them when you're purchasing products is that we're now starting to understand that. Actually, I like to back up a little bit. When you're choosing a product, the first thing that you'll want to do is figure out whether you want a THC product or a CBD product, or maybe something that's got a little bit of both, because that's going to be the real driver of your experience. And the second thing you want to pay attention to are the terpenes, especially if you are vaping or smoking. Either ones, because when you inhale the terpenes, they can help you feel the very specific effects that we get from cannabis. And that's why sometimes you'll smoke a joint, for example, and you'll feel like, oh, I'm going to get up and dance and do the housework. And sometimes you'll smoke a joint and you'll like, I need to go to bed immediately, even if they had the same THC percentage, which is really confusing. And the devil's in the details, the devil's in the terpenes in that case. That terpene or cannabis plants that smell bright and uplifting, pine, lemon, when you smell it and you feel kind of like, ooh, those are plants that if you vape or inhale them, you will probably feel uplifted. And if you're smelling a cannabis chemovar strain and it smells dank or skunky or earthy, you're probably going to have a relaxed and sedative experience. When you're playing around with edibles, it doesn't seem to matter quite as much. But if you're vaping or smoking, you definitely want to like get your nose right in there. You don't even have to know the terpene names. Just start paying attention to how that smell makes you feel on the other end. And because you're tracking, then you'll be able to better predict your experience.
I never knew that about the smell. That's so interesting. Yeah, just follow the nose. It always knows.
You know what's really, actually, this sounds a little bit woo, but I like to talk about it anyway, is that actually if you smell a cannabis plant and you're like, oh, you shouldn't smoke it. That's a primitive part of your brain
Right.
telling you like, this isn't for me. And on the other hand, if you smell one and you love it, definitely try that kind, even if it's new for you.
Well, Andrea, this has been so illuminating. Thank you so much for your time. And if people want to find out more about you, about Cannabis Coaching Institute, about Reveal Cannabis, what should they do?
They should head to revealcannabis.com and sign up for my newsletter. And I send out information about all the different parts of my cannabis life over there, including live workshops and online clubs. I do retreats. I have free cannabis education on social media and YouTube. So yeah, if you head to revealcannabis.com, then it'll all be there for you.
Well, that's very exciting. And do you have clients in the States as well?
Most of my clients are from the States.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, call me up.
Yeah, call you up. I think I'm going to call you up. I'm into it.
All right. I'll chat with you soon.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in North America. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, head on over to wanabrands.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, brands.com.